Live from Mass Media Technology Hall, home to WKU's School of Journalism and Broadcasting. Investigating and addressing problems and issues affecting the Bowling Green community. Hear from our experts on what matters to you. Revolution Platform begins right now.
From the School of Journalism and Broadcasting at Western Kentucky University, I'm Sam Gormley with tonight's Revolution 91.7 Platform Report, where we hear from you and the community about problems and issues facing the Bowling Green area. A topic across sports that has come under evaluation over the past few years is concussions. According to the NCAA, there were 10,500 concussions between 2010 and 2014. The NCAA has continued to try and make improvements to this area of the game. After concussion is reported, athletes go through a strict protocol to re-enter the game. WKU reporter Dalton Godbey talked with one trainer about how he deals with these situations.
With the intensity of sports increasing, head injuries are found more often. Last season it was recorded by the NCAA that 18% of athletes reported a concussion in the past season. WKU has athletic trainers for every sports program on the Hill, and one specifically is Mike Gaddy, the head basketball trainer. I was able to catch up with him and talk about concussion protocols.
Check all the bad stuff first, and then once you start that, the concussion protocol takes over, which tells you start assessing balance, you start assessing memory, you start assessing cognitive awareness. It's a pretty complicated process. It's very detailed, and it's not based on each athlete other than the fact that if they've had a concussion before or not, and when their last concussion was. So
WKU has programs implemented to ensure the concussion protocols are followed in every situation. Reporting for Revolution 91.7, I'm Dalton Godbey.
Thank you, Dalton, for that report. Joining me tonight to continue our discussion about concussions is Brian Schneider, the head athletic trainer for WKU football. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to start off with primarily just going with a very basic question of just asking what really is a concussion?
Concussion is an injury to the brain that's caused through either an acceleration, deceleration, or rotation of the head that makes the brain slosh around or bang against the skull. And when that occurs, the brain tissue is disrupted, which disrupts the electrical impulses going through the brain and also the chemical reactions going on. So that can cause all kinds of disruptions that go through an emotional response and through psychological responses.
Now, when a player has a possible concussion on the field, what signs do you look for to know to bring them on the sideline to give them a concussion test?
Well, now we have spotters. The referees are trained as well. And myself and my assistants stand on the sideline and watch the game. If we suspect a concussion or if the player comes to us complaining of concussion-like symptoms, they come over to my evaluation area, and we kind of start that process. And part of that process starts by just asking, how are you feeling? Do you remember what happened? And then we kind of get into the specialized tests, such as the BEST test, which is a balance test, a King-Devick, which is an eye movement tracking numbers. There's the SCAT-3, which is symptom scales. So there's various tests that we do, as well as just recall. We'll tell them a series of 3 to 5 words to recall over a short period of time. You take all of these tools into account during this process, and you have the physician there as well. So through that process, we're able to diagnose a concussion right there on the sideline within a reasonable amount of time.
Now, usually after the concussion is diagnosed, they're immediately entered into concussion protocol.
That's correct.
Now, what does concussion protocol usually consist of, and how long does it usually take to go through?
So the concussion protocol is based on the symptoms of the concussion. So you enter into, so let's say we have a concussion out of practice or in a game. Typically we will take them down into the training room for that, get them away from the noise and the bright lights and the environment, and get them down where it's kind of quiet and we can have a more private evaluation. And then if we do decide that, yes, this player has a concussion, then we want to get them out of their equipment. We usually let them shower, and then we park them in the training room for evaluation for either the rest of that evening or that game, just making sure that we don't go into any type of elongated head trauma. So we're looking for, if their pupils aren't responding, we're looking for vomiting, falling asleep, things like that. Those really tip us off that we need to go to the emergency room. If these things aren't happening, we'll keep them under observation for a few hours, and then we'll release them with their roommate or a parent, somebody that will take them home. We can't have a concussed athlete driving home. That's just not safe. So then they kind of go through our concussion protocol, which is they check in with me every morning and throughout the afternoon, and we track their symptoms. We're looking for dizziness. We're looking for nausea. We're looking for bright light, hearing, a lot of these different symptoms. So as these symptoms, we scale them on a 0 to 6 scale. 6 meaning we got to go to the hospital. 0 meaning it's not a problem at all. And as these symptoms, they usually start in the 5 to 4 range. As these symptoms start to slide down over the next few days into the 0s and 1s or 2s, we'll start them into kind of a graduated return of activity. So that usually starts on the exercise bike, maybe day 3 or day 4, depending on the symptoms. And then if that goes well, then we go in the weight room and do some light body lifting or go out on the field and just do some easy jogging. And then the next day we kind of just keep progressing the activity, looking to see if these symptoms either come back or exacerbate. And if they don't, then we just keep moving through the next step. When they start the activity process, we would like to have them through the activity process within 3 to 4 days. And so you go from a graduated exercise bike to eventually a non-contact practice where they're in an orange jersey, and then a limited contact practice. And then if those 2 stages go well, then we return into full activity.
Now, for a player that might be having, this might be his 2nd or 3rd concussion, does the concussion protocol change at all, or is it usually the same?
Yes, as these concussions compound in number for that athlete, we like a longer period of time of non-symptomatic before returning. If we see a 3rd concussion in one season, that could be shutting them down for the remainder of that season. And then we have to get into neurocognitive testing to even talk about returning them the next year.
Now, what more can the NCAA do to improve safety of players?
Right now the NCAA is trying to add guidelines. So now our concussion protocol must be submitted to the NCAA for their review, and then they get back to us and let us know how that guideline matches up to their criteria. Right now, I think the biggest need is them enforcing. There's not really a true way for them to enforce these guidelines. So if a school doesn't properly go through these guidelines and there's no enforcement, then what are we really doing? What's the incentive?
We'll be back with more from Brian Schneider about concussions when we return from this station break. From the campus of WKU, you are listening to WWHR Revolution 91.7.
You're listening to Revolution Platform on Revolution 91.7. Up next, continued coverage on problems and issues affecting our community.
Me, a cat, moving in with a single guy. At first, I thought it might be a little weird, but turns out it's actually pretty amusing. For instance, my human's gotten so used to me being around, sometimes I think he forgets I'm here. He'll get up for work, shower, shave, and come out with no pants. Plops right down in front of the TV. Hello, there's a lady in the room.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Welcome back. We are talking with Brian Schneider, the head athletic trainer for WKU football, about concussions. Now, you said that the NCAA isn't doing much to enforce. What has WKU done to improve the care of players with concussions and even to help with everything with concussions?
Sure. Well, I think the number one thing that we've done to improve our concussion management program is we review our concussion protocol every year. I sit down with our neurologist, we sit down with our team physicians, and we go over the best practices and the newest studies, the newest literature. I speak with several other head athletic trainers around the country about what they're doing, some of the premier Power 5 schools about how they're running their concussion protocols. And then we go back and evaluate our program and what can we add, what can we do better. So typically we do that at the conclusion of every season and really try to make improvements each year.
Now, House Bill 116 is proposed in the state of North Carolina, which would give parents the right to make the decision on whether their concussed child can go back into the game or play in the game. What is your opinion on this proposed bill?
I do not think that is a good idea unless their parent happens to be a neurologist or a orthopedic doctor or an athletic trainer. You have to remove the emotional, parental aspect from that because, as we know, some parents kind of live vicariously through their children and they want them to play and succeed and earn these scholarships and eventually maybe one day make it to the NFL. And so I don't think that they're going to be as objective as a medical professional. So if they feel like little Johnny's got to go back in so that they can look great for college tape, they're going to put them back in. And I think you're doing a disservice to the athlete and to someone that's got a brain that's still developing.
Yeah, especially for younger children. Now, we were talking before you came on about WKU working with blood testing when it comes to concussions. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. So one of the developing areas of concussion research and concussion diagnosis is trying to find a more objective, quantitative means of diagnosing concussions. So we, as an institution and our doctors, saw some interesting literature about protein testing and protein diagnosis of concussion going on in Europe, and we said, this sounds really neat. We want to evaluate this more. We want to check it out. And Dr. Tad Seifert is our neurologist with the team, and he got Norton Healthcare to donate a large grant sum to us. And so we brought the whole team down and got a baseline of their protein with their neurocognitive proteins. And so we knew what each athlete's baseline was. Some was 64, some was 20. You got to know what the starting point, what the normal for that athlete is. And so once we had that before we even started football, then once a concussion was diagnosed, 2 hours after diagnosis, we would pull their blood, and then we all stayed blind to this study throughout the season. We didn't want this influencing our decision-making because it's not really proven science yet. So at the end of the season, we get our reports back from the labs giving us the numbers, and a lot of these numbers really jumped off the page. You're seeing 180% increase of some of these proteins with concussion. But some of the interesting information came from just pulling it after a padded practice and what we call a subconcussive hit. So the defensive linemen, offensive linemen, tight ends, these guys are banging heads every single play, every single rep of practice. So they're getting 300 to 400 contacts to the head per practice. And so when you pulled their blood, even after practice, we were seeing 70 to 80% increases in these proteins. And you look at it, and some of the new ideas are these subconcussive hits adding up to a concussion. Maybe it's not just the one big hit that happens. Maybe it's the idea of taking a piece of concrete and hitting it with a hammer 500-600 times. Eventually the concrete will chip and break, right? It wasn't the first 200 that caused it. So maybe we're looking at these multitude of subconcussive hits that lead into concussion, and I think some of that data kind of proves that.
Yeah, thank you. We have been talking with Brian Schneider about concussions. From the School of Journalism and Broadcasting at Western Kentucky University, I'm Sam Gormley with today's Revolution 91.7 Platform Report, where we hear from you and the community about problems and issues facing the Bowling Green area. Coming up after the break, Dalton Godbey will talk to Chandler McPherson about his experiences with concussions.
You're listening to Revolution Platform on Revolution 91.7. Stay tuned for more on issues affecting Bowling Green after this short break.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to start foraging wild berries.
I was skeptical, but these are actually pretty good.
You don't need to sell your soul to the devil.
$15 is the best I can do.
You just need FeedThePig.org. Don't get left behind. Get tips and tools at FeedThePig.org. Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
We're your pets, and this song's dedicated to those people who don't have health insurance yet. Enroll, we say. We want you to be okay. Enroll, we say. Take care, people, for goodness sake.
Health insurance is now affordable and covers prescriptions, hospitalizations, and preventive care. Visit GetCoveredAmerica.org to learn more.
And take care, people.
Brought to you by Get Covered America and the Ad Council.
From the School of Journalism and Broadcasting at Western Kentucky University, I'm Dalton Godbey with tonight's Revolution 91.7 Platform Report, where we hear from you and the community about problems and issues facing the Bowling Green area. Concussions are causing lifelong head injuries to athletes across the world. Many athletes face concussion symptoms all throughout their college career and never say a thing. Concussions in sports are a serious issue and is causing many players to have to give up their playing days far too early. However, college athletics programs are doing everything in their power to help the situation. Revolution 91.7 reporter Sam Gormley went out to determine the students' opinions on the controversial targeting rule implemented in football today.
One of the more controversial rules in all of sports is the targeting rule in football. The rule states that no player shall target and initiate contact to the head or neck area of a defenseless opponent with a helmet, forearm, fist, elbow, or shoulder. When in question, it is a foul. Fans have become frustrated on the implementation of this rule.
It's hard because it's still a gray area on all things, and even with the rule, like it's like something that just kind of happens. Like it's hard to make a rule over something that happens so quick, and it's kind of just like a snap of a play. Like it's a 3-second thing. You can't really like kind of judge.
A lot of these ejection penalty calls that they're calling are split-second decisions that are not usually the fault of the player. It's just a bad, just wrong place, wrong time situation.
The rule was updated in 2013 to focus on the severity of the hits. An NCAA committee is meeting next week to discuss a possible update to this rule. For News 91.7, I'm Sam Gormley.
Thank you, Sam, for that report. And joining me tonight to continue our discussion about concussions in college sports is Chandler McPherson, a former WKU football player. Chandler, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, I just want to have you kind of explain your career with football and how many times you actually witnessed concussions or head injuries, not yourself, but in other people.
Well, I played here at Western for 2 years. I accumulated 3 concussions over my 2 years playing here. I witnessed several different concussions from different kinds of from positions of players, so it was definitely pretty evenly spread throughout the positions.
Take me through a day of practice for a WKU lineman like you used to be. You know, how many times are you taking blows to the head?
Well, my freshman and sophomore year here, I played center, guard, and tackle, all 3 positions, just because there was some injuries going around the team, and I had to fill in. It was nothing to take close to probably 300-400 blows to the head. Every practice was about 2.5-3 hours with both coaches, because I played under Petrino and under Brom as well. They ran a pretty fast-paced practice, so there wasn't much standing around or getting water on the sidelines. Everyone on the team did their part, and everyone got their playing time. So
you talk about how many hits to the head you take. Even without having a concussion or anything, after coming off of practice like that every day, I mean, it would seem like your head would hurt and pound for hours. Is that something that's true?
Well, it kind of varied from player to player. My freshman year I came from a very small rural town where there was, probably about 40, 50 guys on the football team. So there wasn't a lot of competition between that, and I had never went against people that were actually my size or bigger. So I was taking some pretty extreme hits that I'd never taken before. And there were some practices that I came off the field and I was, I had just a splitting headache, and, you take some ibuprofen and, you go at it the next day. I can say that I had 2 other teammates on Western's team that they complained of the same thing. But we just kind of all did the Tylenol trick and took a couple and did it the next day.
Chandler, you talked about your 3 concussions with WKU football. Can you kind of go into depth for us and explain those experiences and kind of what you went through as a player with the Western Kentucky football team?
Yeah, all 3 concussions were a little different. The first one was due to Andrew Jackson, as we all know, the stud middle linebacker that played at Western. Ended up going and playing for the Colts for a couple of years. It was just a regular day of practice. I was a freshman. I was on the scout team. We were running a regular play, and he sent a blitz, and I never went against anybody like that. Didn't know how to handle it at first. The symptoms started pretty immediately. I started having some peripheral vision issues. Everything was just more of like a tunnel, like I was just looking through a little like PVC pipe, if you will. And then I started getting a really, really bad headache, like nothing that I'd experienced before. It felt like somebody was just hitting me in the head consistently. And so I ended up going to one of Brian Schneider's assistant trainers, Gabby, and I told her what was going on, and she knew that she knew the protocol. She'd been trained and she was well informed of what the symptoms were. And so she immediately got my helmet off, got my shoulder pads off, took me to Brian. Brian put me through the entire protocol for testing and seeing if I was testing positive for a concussion. That day I did. Within an hour, I was in the training room showering and had myself parked in the training room for a couple hours under observation. They were making sure I wasn't having anything too serious or life-threatening, if you will. And then, so that was fall semester of my freshman year. And then spring came around. I went through the entire protocol back in fall, got better, returned to play in about 2 weeks, I believe. And then spring semester came around. We were in spring practice, and kind of the same thing happened. I took a nasty hit. Tunnel vision came back. I was seeing some spots in there. Headache came back, and then I started having some balance issues. And so all the symptoms that were going on were increasing steadily. And so they put me through the protocol. Same thing. It took me about a week longer to recover. And then the third one, everything was the same. And I ended up actually having some memory issues. Like I studied one Saturday morning for about 3 or 4 hours, took a nap, woke back up, couldn't remember a thing. And I immediately called Brian. I was like, hey, I need your help, dude. Like, I don't know what's going on. So he checked me out, tested positive again. And we went through the entire protocol. That time it actually ended up going about 4 to 5 weeks before I was able to return to play.
We'll talk more about those concussions and the protocols. When we come back, we will talk more with Chandler about his experiences with concussions when we return from the station break. From the campus of WKU, you're listening to WWHR Revolution 91.7.
You're listening to Revolution Platform on Revolution 91.7. Up next, continued coverage on problems and issues affecting our community.
Today, my new dad threw a barbecue.
I burnt everything.
And then we played catch.
I broke Mr. Lewis's window. And then, somehow, my hand. My hand!
And then my dad even let me drive his car.
The hospital's on the right! It was a rough day.
It was a great day.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are. For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Tonight we're speaking with former WKU football player Chandler McPherson about college sports and concussions. Recently, Chandler, we discussed your concussions and experiences with those. You said that you had 3, and you talked a little bit about that. Take me through what a concussion protocol is.
Well, so as soon as the trainer sees symptoms or the player starts telling the trainer about symptoms, they immediately pull you off the field, pull you from play. They get your helmet off, your shoulder pads, all your gear off. They take you down into the training room, just like Brian was talking about. They let you take a shower, kind of let you recover a little bit. They put you through the entire test. What they're testing for is just different neurocognitive disorders and disabilities in that aspect. So they're checking your pupils to see if you're dilating, because that's a main test for cognitive reflex. And then they test your balance. So what they'll have you do is they'll have you put your feet together, just stacked like in front of, each one in front of the other, and then, close your eyes, and they'll pull you to each side and see if you have if you're favoring to one side or not. And then they'll ask you about how bad your headache is, 0 to 6, 6, we're going to the emergency room right now, and then 0, you're symptom free. Once you test positive, they hold you in the training room for a couple hours and make sure you don't have any more symptoms. They're making sure that they get everything down, and then they send you home with one of your people you live with, one of your roommates. They tell them to watch you all night. If you start showing any symptoms, they give them their phone number. They tell them to call them, even if it's questionable or not. And the next day you come in, Brian or one of the trainers will assess how bad your symptoms are, your headache, your imbalance, your how sensitive you are to light, sound, if you can remember things or not. And usually those first couple of days, if you're really starting to show some really bad symptoms, you're not getting any better, they'll pull you from class. And that's what they ended up doing to me on my second one. The symptoms weren't going away, and they pulled me from class for about 3 days. They told me to just kind of stay in my room, no TV, no phone, not much light, just sleep, just give that brain some time to rest. And then they bring you in every day. It's pretty much the same thing. Every morning at 7:30, you have to be there. You have to fill out kind of like a score sheet, 0 to 6, same thing. And then every afternoon right before practice, same thing, 0 to 6, what are your symptoms like? And until you become symptom free, they don't return you to any kind of physical activity. They don't want that heart rate getting up much, just due to that increasing blood pressure and causing more headaches and more symptoms. Whenever you become symptom free, they put you back into the weightlifting and the running, agilities, stuff like that in the mornings. And as long as you go through that with no symptoms, then you go through a couple practices without pads. You're doing the same stuff, just no hitting. You have a different colored jersey on, it's like orange, yellow, something bright, something that no one's going to hit you if you have that on. And that's really expressed hard whenever that protocol started to come about. And once you become symptom free through that and everything's good, then they return you to play and keep an eye on you.
Chandler, 3,417 concussions in 2013 in the sport of football, according to the American Physical Therapy Association. Is this a number that surprises you?
Honestly, no, it's not. I know different people are susceptible to the amount of concussions and even to getting a concussion. And but that number, I would honestly expect it to be higher with as many football players there are on each team.
You and I know many people as well look to see that number decrease here in the coming years, and something that we can hope for as a WKU football program and as a country as well, to see that number fall. We've been talking with Chandler McPherson about concussion protocols in college sports from the School of Journalism and Broadcasting at Western Kentucky University.